सो हे गाइस, वेलकम बैक टू अनदर वीडियो। आज अपन लर्न करने वाले हैं हाउ कर्सर वर्क्स, हाउ इट कनेक्ट्स फ्रॉम फ्रंट एंड टू बैक एंड, व्हाट आर द थिंग्स दैट आर गोइंग ऑन इट्स बैक एंड, हाउ इट connects with models, LLMs, and what are the things that made it so popular and so liked by the white coders. And also, there are some interesting facts about Cursor, like how it is built on top of VS Code, and even after building on top of VS Code, it is more popular than VS Code itself. So let's dive into it. Let's go step by step. So how Cursor works, right? What is Cursor? Cursor is an IDE like VS Code, but it is based for white coders, right? Now, a step-by-step look at the engineering behind Cursor, from why it's a VS Code fork to how it reads your entire code base without ever seeing your code on its servers, right? So your code is not transferred to their servers. How it works, like this is something that is very interesting to know without using your code or training its data over code. It trains your data over code because Cursor Grok is the model that Cursor introduced and it's trained on your code itself. So I won't claim that. Now the core decisions, fork versus extension, right? Let's dive into it. The core decision, fork versus extension. Before any AI feature, a Cursor made one foundational choice that shapes everything else. It did not build itself as a plugin on top of VS Code. It forked VS Code entirely and built its own editor from that code base, right? So what it did, it forked VS Code, and then using that, it built its own editor, right? It used it as a you can say a boilerplate code, and then it built its own editor over it, and then used it for its own code base, right? Now, this sounds like a small detail, but it decides what Cursor is even allowed to do, right? So if you see extension and fork example, let me give you some example of extension and let me give you some example of fork. अब extension में अगर आप देखोगे, so there is Copilot. Copilot is also an extension, right? It runs inside VS Code using VS Code's official extension API. ठीक है, तो VS Code की जो official extension API है उसका use करके it can only do what that API allows, limited access to editors, internal file systems and rendering, right? So if we अगर Cursor एक अपना खुद का एक extension बनाता, there were some limitations, right? Limited access होता उसके पास, editors एडिटर के जो इंटरनल टूल्स है लाइक ENVs एंड दोज काइंड ऑफ, उन चीज़ों का इसको एक्सेस नहीं मिलता, एंड फाइल सिस्टम का भी एक्सेस बहुत लिमिटेड होता, राइट? फाइल सिस्टम एक्सेस वाज लिमिटेड, एंड रेंडरिंग तो अलाउड नहीं होती, आई गेस, राइट? नॉट मच रेंडरिंग वेर अलाउड. अगर आप कर्सर अभी भी यूज़ करते हो, इट बिल्ड्स इट्स ओन ग्राफ, राइट? दैट ग्राफ यू कैन प्रिव्यू. नाउ फॉर्क, राइट? फॉर्क क्या है? फॉर्क का एग्जांपल इज कर्सर इटसेल्फ. इट ओन्स द एंटायर एडिटर. It owns the entire editor. File system access है इसके पास, right? System access, extension host. It can build features and extension simply isn't allowed to build, right? It can build any features. It can build any features. तो यही reason है कि Cursor used this technique, fork technique, instead of creating a extension like GitHub Copilot did, because it knows there are limitations and they have to rely on VS Code. They have to talk back and forth to take permission. Even if they are allowed, then also there will be too many situations where just their company rules and regulations won't allow them to access file systems and other things in the user's account, right? Because those are defined in terms and conditions of extensions, right? Now, analogy, being an extension is like being a guest in someone else's house, which is correct analogy. If you see, you have to follow proper rules of their house, right? You can only use the rooms you are given. Forking the editor is like owning the house. You can knock down a wall if you need to, right? So that was about why they choose fork over creating an extension. This single decision is what enables three things later in this document: inline overlays that update live, deep code base indexing, and background agents that run in isolated cloud machines. So these are the things we'll be taking a look at, and these are the things enabled because they forked it and did not create an extension. Otherwise GitHub Copilot की जैसा ही बन जाता, right? The big picture, client and server, right? The big picture is client and server. Cursor has two halves, right? It has two halves. Your local editor, which is the client, and the Cursor's cloud infrastructure, which is the backend. ठीक है, तो इसके दो parts है, right? Client, your local editor, which is client, right? And Cursor का खुद का cloud infrastructure, Cursor's its backend. Almost all real AI work happens on the backend. Your laptop mostly just captures context and displays the result. So most of the AI work hai, that happens on backend, because of course there are gateways. Backend work as a gateway, right? वो जो भी काम है, logic and all microservices lies in backend. Client is just it shows as a UI context वगैरह जो भी है वो यहाँ से grab करके it pass to the backend and backend works. Now your machine, right? अब मैं एक let me just create a diagram here. एडिटर VS कोड 4 कलेक्ट्स कोड कॉन्टेक्स्ट, ठीक है, तो ये भी आपके मशीन में ही होता है. What else it does? It encrypts snippet locally, right? Encrypts code snippets locally. और फिर एक tree sitter, if you are aware, tree sitter is basically tree sitter is used, it's language agnostic, right? Whatever languages there like JavaScript, Java, Python, Golang, C plus C sharp, तो वो सबके साथ compatible है. That is used for indexing. So tree sitter for chunking in indexing, right? We have seen 1, 2, 3, and okay, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3 and 4. Now cursor cloud backend में क्या होता है, right? It decrypts snippet first. यहाँ पे अपन ने encrypt किए snippet को, यहाँ पे decrypt करेंगे, otherwise how will LLM understand, right? Decrypts snippet, right? After that it builds final prompt. Now if you are aware, builds final prompt मतलब क्या होता है ना कि if you see in cursor they have their own techniques to build a prompt. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने कोड पास किया, it decrypts the snippet and pass it directly to the LLM and LLM then works on its own. ये तो काफ़ी बेसिक हो गया, right? If you even use open AI, उधर जाके आप कोड आपका पास कर दो and you don't let it know that what you want to do with that code, then it won't understand, right? Even in cursor, even if we pass our prompt, it builds on top of that prompt so that the response is properly built, and it also try to collect the context over using RAG, and there are many techniques to collect that. It uses those techniques to create a final prompt. Now what is the third? It calls the most important LLM. It can be in-house ka example is Grok, right? It can be Claude, Opus, or any other. It can call GPT, it can call DeepSeek, it can call Kimi, right? There are many other options. You can enable it from, अगर आप कर्सर में जाओगे, on bottom left hand side if you see there is this model selection thing, right? And you can click on that and add more models. So yeah, now beside this, this is 1, 2, 3, and fourth is what? Vector embeddings, right? So there will, in backend there will be vector DB to save vector embeddings, and embeddings would be saved here, and orchestration. So orchestration is the thing like how this all works together. So that thing is orchestration. So yeah. So yeah, one more thing here is encrypted suggestions. So whenever data is passed from your machine to cursor, it is in encrypted format, and whenever the cursor cloud backend gives whatever data to your machine, those all are suggestions, and from those suggestions you can select and work on whatever you want. Even when you plug in your own API key, request still flow through cursor's backend for prompt construction, right? Even अगर आप अपना खुद का you bring your own key, right, or bring your own model kind of thing, if you use with cursor, still it goes through cursor's backend, and the final prompts are built on cursor's backend only, right? This matters for understanding cost, latency, and privacy, right? अब ये क्यों होता है? Because they want so you can understand about how much cost has been utilized by cursor, right? When you are using that key as a bring your own key on cursor, and to understand latency, privacy, cursor's real product isn't the editor UI, it's the orchestration layer that sits between you and the models, right? So editor can be built by anyone, right? VS Code is also an editor, and combining it with Copilot could have made something like what Cursor did, right? But Cursor is better because the main difference is in their orchestration layer, right? So yeah. Now how autocomplete feels so instant in Cursor? Let's check that, right? Autocomplete in Cursor's, how autocomplete feels so instant in Cursor, right? Autocomplete is Cursor's highest traffic feature, right? This is the main feature where Cursor differentiates from its competition, VS Code or any other code editors, right? There were Atom, VS Code, and there were like Visual Studio. There are many code editors. How Cursor shined is basically its autocomplete feature. This one, its backend handles over 1 million requests per second at peak, mostly from these small constant completion calls. Now what happens, let me define it step by step. So as you type, the client grabs a small snippet of your current code context. तो आप जैसे जैसे टाइप कर रहे हो, what client does, client, you are typing, right? You are typing. What client does, it grabs small snippet of your code context, right? Second, what happens? That snippet is encrypted locally before it ever leaves your machine, right? The encryption part I already showed you, right? So that snippet is encrypted locally before it ever leaves your machine. And guys, make a habit of writing, I would say, because doesn't matter if you write on iPad or paper or wherever, because it lets you understand the concept and make you remember it for a long time. So make a habit of writing. I know it's time for AI and writing is too stone age kind of thing, but still, if there are concepts that you need to remember for a long time and it's hard for you to by heart it, then please make a habit of writing. You will see the difference. Now the third point is the encrypted snippet is sent to cursor's server, right? This encrypted snippet is sent to who? Cursor's servers, right? Now then it gets decrypted there. There might be some key which they might be using for encryption and decryption, right? There, and fed to cursor's in-house completion model, right? So this is the third step. Now fourth step is what? The model returns a suggestion shown inline as gray ghost text. You can accept with tab. If you are aware about ghost text, तो अगर आप cursor जब भी चलाते हो, what happens? It उधर कुछ ना कुछ, like if you expand what it is thinking, it layers it out, right? कि this is the code base that I have gone through, and this is the code that I found, and these are the duplications. I need to ask user about these duplications if these are okay or not. So these kind of question it thinks on its own, and that is happening because of this, right? So 4 kya hai? The model returns a suggestion shown in line as gray, which is ghost text. You can accept using tab. So yeah, privacy detail. Cursor does not persistently store the code sent for autocomplete. It's decrypted, used for the one reference called, and discarded immediately here. So it doesn't store your code snippet, so discard kar deta hai whatever code snippet that they have with them. The whole round trip is engineered to finish in well under a second. ठीक है, तो this whole round trip is engineered such that it finish it in seconds. That's what makes it feel like a suggestion is just there rather than something you waited for. So that's how it's so fast. आपने टाइप किया, client grabs a small snippet of your code context, right? Client ने क्या किया, आपके code context का एक small snippet grab किया while you are typing. That snippet is encrypted locally before it ever leaves your machine. ठीक है, and encrypted snippet then gets decrypted on their servers and fed to cursor's in-house completion model. They also have their in-house completion model. Cursor के अलावा भी they have their in-house completion models. The model returns a suggestion shown inline as gray. अब ये inline gray वाला जो suggestion है, it's not what I just said. Thinking वाला is something different. But this is what कि autocomplete जब आप देखते हो आपके cursor में there is autocomplete. अपन तो खैर we don't use it anymore. It was the thing that previously people use, right? अगर आप code लिख रहे हो, I am typing some code, right? And just click on tab and autocomplete. That's how. So they have their own in-house completion model, due to which it was working, right? So this whole thing was working like that. My bad that I just मैंने आपको कुछ और concept बता दिया. But this concept is regarding auto completion feature, right? Okay. अभी तो खैर VS Code में भी there are many autocomplete features, but those are not that accurate, I would say, right? How cursor reads your whole code base. Now this is something interesting. How cursor reads your whole code base. Autocomplete only needs the current file, but cursors chat and multi-file edits. अब यहाँ पे अपन आते हैं chat वाले context window पे, right? Now how it works and what it needs, right? Autocomplete only needs current file. Autocomplete को तो current file चाहिए, कुछ code snippets चाहिए to just feed their in-house completion model, and using that they can suggest other, मतलब जो भी आगे का code है, they can suggest it easily, and you can use tab to autocomplete. But for cursor in chat and multi-file edits need to understand your entire project, hundreds of thousands of files. It can't just paste it into one prompt. This is solved by code base indexing, right? अब जैसे इफ यू सी, अगर उसको बहुत सारी फाइल्स एडिट करनी है, इट नीड्स टू हैव द कोड बेस का पूरा knowledge graph, right? It needs to have the understanding of the entire project. There will be hundreds of thousands of files which they need to index, and basically LLM needs to understand what is code base. You can also use Mermaid, by the way. It's not related to Cursor, that is another plugin, but it's free to use. You can maintain a code graph or knowledge graph for your whole project. I have done in some of my project, I have maintained a Mermaid graph. उससे क्या होता है ना कि whenever you are working on any new feature, just ask your coding agent, whatever, like Grok or Opus 5 or 4.8, ask it to take a reference of this code graph. तो उसको clear होता है कि these are the layers we have, these are the logic, where this logic lies, what it does. तो उसके basis पे it creates your code base and make sure that nothing gets breaked. Now, what are the steps for this, right? Code base को कैसे understand करता है? So what happens? You open a project, right? Now, if you see what happens, कि project opened, files split into chunks, functions, classes using tree sitter. Tree sitter I've already explained, it's language agnostic. Splitting respects code structure, not arbitrary line counts, right? तो वो क्या करता है, फाइल को चंक्स में स्प्लिट करके, लाइक फंक्शन क्लासेस, इट यूज ट्री सिटर, and then these chunks are encrypted locally. File names obfuscated, right? File names को वो obfuscate करता है. Obfuscation is a technique, right, to make sure that file names are named in such a way that hackers cannot understand that, right? Machine language can understand, machines can understand, compilers can understand, it doesn't affect on that. का obfuscation पे मेरी पूरी एक वीडियो है, you can just check it out on my channel. I will link it in this video as well. देन सेंड टू कर्सर सर्वर, ठीक है? तो एनक्रिप्शन होता है, ऑब्फस्केशन होता है, उसके बाद वो कर्सर के सर्वर पे जाता है. थर्ड स्टेप इज सर्वर कंप्यूट्स एंड एम्बेडिंग अ वेक्टर कैप्चरिंग मीनिंग फॉर ईच चंक, ठीक है? तो वो वेक्टर एम्बेडिंग्स क्रिएट करता है आउट ऑफ दैट. सो इट मतलब कभी भी लाइक सिमेंटिक सर्च करके भी इट कैन मेक श्योर दैट वट एवर रिलेटिव कोड relevant code base are there, it can just search over it and pass those context to LLM. Now, fourth is only the embedding vectors are stored in Turbopuffer cursors vector database, ठीक है? तो Turbopuffer is vectors cursors vector database, its own in-house database Turbopuffer. So सिर्फ embeddings store होती है vector embeddings, right? Then when you ask your question in chat, let's say command K, in if you are using Mac it's command K, on Windows it's control K, is turned on into a vector 2, ठीक है? A cursor runs a similarity search against the stored embeddings. I already told you about that, right? Finding code by meaning, not exact keyword match. If the actual code is needed to answer properly, the server asks your client for those specific chunks by their obfuscated ID. अगर एक्चुअल कोड इज नीडेड टू आंसर प्रॉपरली, तो वो सर्वर जो है इट विल आस्क योर कोड बाय दर ऑब्फस्केटेड आईडी कि ये है. आई मीन इफ देयर आर सम वैल्यूज इन डॉट env, it needs to know if it's true or false. Then it will ask the client itself, or fair, right? Your client sends those chunks, right? It can copy those chunks, or it can just say that it's false, right? And that will again be encrypted, and server decrypts them for that one query, then discards them again. So cursor is, I mean, उन्होंने काफ़ी ध्यान रखा है कि whenever they work with any big company, big MNC, that's why Cursor is being adopted by big companies, big MNCs, because they have made sure that whatever things that you have in your own project, those are encrypted before leaving your machine and decrypted after on their machine and discarded after once the work is done. They do not store any of your code base, right? So analogic, think of it like a binary that only keeps an index card for every book, what it's about, not the book itself. When you ask a question, it's kind of an index card, right? मैंने book में कैसे we create a bookmark, right? कि A, B, C, whatever pages are there, or whatever alphabets or whatever things that you find relative, funny emojis, it can be anything, right? So kind of that, to know that what things lie where, not the book itself. When you ask a question, the librarian finds the right index card, then ask you to hand over just those specific books briefly to answer your question, right? There can be categories of books as well that can also be an index, right? This is also why it respects .git ignore and .cursor ignore file. Anything listed there never gets chunked or sent in the first place, right? Now keeping the index fresh, how this works. अब index तो हो गया, right? Index is fine, index can be done, बट इंडेक्स को फ्रेश कैसे रखा जाए, हाउ वी मेक श्योर द इंडेक्स इज लेटेस्ट, राइट? कीपिंग index fresh. Merkle tree. Now code changes. Now if you see, this is the diagram of Merkle tree, but let me explain you. Code changes constantly. Resending your entire project every few minutes would be slow and wasteful, right? अगर like code changes every minute, right? But and wipe due to wipe coding वो तो और ज़्यादा frequently होता है, right? Now sending your whole project, it will be too much time consuming and slow and wasteful, right? Cursor solves this with Merkle tree, a hash-based structure that makes it cheap to spot exactly what changed. Okay? So instead of sending each file, it uses Merkle tree, which helps it to spot exactly what things are changed, the diffs only. Now what happens? ये एक root है. There is hash a node. Right? There is hash a node. There is hash b node. Hash b node has file 4, file 5, file 6. Hash a node has file 1, file 2, file 3, and this file is the only one which is edited, so it will only send it and compare it against the diff and will update according to that, right? Only hash a's branch changes, hash b's branch is untouched, so it's skipped entirely. ठीक है, तो यही branch में work हुआ है, so it just went inside its tree in this direction. ठीक है, उसने पहले इस पे check किया, there is no nothing, it checked on second, it's there is no nothing change, it checked on third one, there is something change, and इसके नीचे भी there can be more roots to it, right? Comparing client and server Merkle trees every few minutes. ठीक है, तो client और server की Merkle tree को अगर आप compare करोगे तो ये क्या करेगा ना कि जैसे यहाँ पे this is the client structure, right? There will be a server's root, right? It will go to hash a and file 3, it will compare these two things, right? And make sure that files on the client side are changed, which are the updated ones, and without rescanning everything, it will just compare these two things and update accordingly. So both the client and the server keep their own Merkle tree of the project. Every few minutes they compare trees, because a hash changes only if something underneath is changed. Cursor can walk straight to the one modified file, skipping entire untouched branch and re-index only that. So that's how it works. Now, how the chat agent picks what to include. Now, this is another interesting thing, how the chat agent picks what to include, right? Now, semantic search, as you are aware, it solves finding relevant code, right? That problem is solved. But there is a second problem, a model's context window is limited. अगर आप कोई भी मॉडल देखोगे, whichever, but there are the context window is limited. I know the new models that are introduced in market, उनकी जो context window है, those are much larger, but still it's limited. वो hallucinate होगी at one point of a time, right? And you can never fit everything possibly relevant into one prompt. Cursor needs to decide what actually makes the cut. Its answer is a system called Priompt, right? Now they designed a system called Priompt. What is Priompt? Now this treats it like a UI. Now it treats it like a UI. Every piece of context, open file, search, results, chat history, rules, gets a priority score. Okay? What it does, every piece of context like open files, search, results, chat history. So इन सबको ना एक priority score मिलता है. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 10 or whatever numbers that they have decided, which is the internal thing. Now when the total context is too big for the model's budget, Priompt drops the lowest priority pieces first, right? अगर let's suppose open files को मैं let's suppose मैंने chat को दिया है first priority, results are second priority, the previous results, third is files, fourth is search, fifth is history, right? Now what it will do, वो history को drop कर देगा, because not everything can be included in this one prompt, right? Now this is done using binary search to find cutoff until what's left fits, right? अब ये binary search के through होता है, जो भी cutoff आपको करना है, let's suppose history को cut करना है, so this is the last node of that branch, so it will remove that and will continue, and after continuing, even if that not fits, it will remove this node, which is search, from its tree. So that's how it happens. और prompt में fit होना चाहिए, if it fits then it continues, because these are low priority, उससे भी context मिल ही रहा है, right? Now analogy, it's like packing a carry on bag for a short trip. You can't take everything you own, so you rank items by importance and leave the least essential ones behind automatically every time based on how much room you actually have. अगर आपके पास एक बैग है, what do? आपको you have headphones, you have phone, you have clothes, you have Raincoat, you have camp, right? If you are traveling or hiking, right, that is also needed. So kind of इसमें से you can decide what are the priorities. Camp is always a priority. Fire, wood, gas, whatever things that you want to take on camp, you can decide कि क्या क्या चीज़ें fit हो रही है. According to that, you can fill your bag, and the things which are not making sense or the uh, आपके बैग में फिट नहीं हो रही, you just remove it. So that's how it works. You can prioritize each thing, most important से लेके least important तक. Yeah. So a persistent memory across session. Two more features to add to this context: rules, plain instruction in markdown files that get injected into every prompt. अगर आप cursor में जाओगे, there is a skills section. You can use slash skill name, and that will be injected with your prompt on their backend. While encryption decryption तो काम कर ही रहा है, and the prompt that get built on their backend, उसके साथ your prompt will be injected, right? It can be coding style, it can be architecture conventions, it can be anything, right? Now memories, where a background model watches your conversations and suggests facts worth remembering long term, which you approve or reject. ठीक है, तो कन्वर्सेशंस जो आपके बैकग्राउंड में हो रही है, मॉडल आपको कुछ सजेशंस देता है और कुछ ऑप्शन देता है, फ्रॉम दैट यू कैन चूज एंड कंटिन्यू, राइट? नाउ बैकग्राउंड एजेंट्स, एआई वर्किंग इन द क्लाउड. प्रियॉम्प्ट का मतलब आप समझ गए, राइट? प्रियॉम्प्ट मीन्स prompt with its own priorities, right? Priorities, यहाँ पे अपन ने एक बाइनरी ट्री बनाया है, yeah, that's. Now background agents. What are background agents? Background agents, AI working in the cloud. AI working in the cloud, right? For long running task, running a test suite, making a broad multi-file refactor. अगर आपको बहुत सारी फाइल्स की रिफैक्टरिंग करनी है और यू वांट टू रन अ टेस्ट सूट, कर्सर कैन हैंड द वर्क ऑफ टू अ बैकग्राउंड एजेंट इंस्टेड ऑफ रनिंग इट ऑन योर मशीन. तो वो क्या करता है, कर्सर एक बैकग्राउंड एजेंट रन करता है. देयर इज स्वॉर्म्स ऑफ एजेंट एक्चुअली. अभी तो एक नया कॉन्सेप्ट आ गया, देयर आर स्वॉर्म्स ऑफ एजेंट दैट कर्सर रन्स, दैट मॉडल्स रन एक्चुअली. अगर आप ऊपर यूज कर रहे हो, इट देयर आर टू टेक्निक्स. एक ही एजेंट को काम पे लगा दो, या स्वॉर्म्स ऑफ एजेंट, एक पे ग्रॉक को लगा दो, एक पे आप किमी को लगा दो, एक पे आप मिनीमैक्स को लगा दो, राइट? So that kind of things also can happen, and also you can use one model across all three swarms of agents. So yeah, ये technique, background agents, whatever, like if you want to run test suite or you want to refactor multiple files, you can run swarms of agent. Now the agent runs on an isolated Ubuntu virtual machine inside Cursor AWS infrastructure, right? अब ये क्या होता है, इंस्टेड ऑफ रनिंग ऑन योर मशीन, तो उसको मॉडल का एक्सेस सब चाहिए, राइट? सो व्हाट इट डज, इट रन्स इट ऑन देयर बैकग्राउंड AWS इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. So what it does, the agent runs on Ubuntu, where it lies AWS infra. जो कर्सर का AWS का इंफ्रा है, वहाँ पे दिस एजेंट्स runs on background, right? Now it can execute code. What these agents can do, it can execute code, it can run tests, it can make changes, and sandbox away from your local environment. These are in some sandbox away from your local environment. This is only possible because Cursor is a full editor fork. Now these all things are possible because of it's a full editor fork, and it is not an extension. An extension has no way to spin up a remote VM and handle it control, right? अगर आप extension बनाते हो, if it was an extension, it has no way to spin up remote VM and hand it control. So it's no way possible, right? इसीलिए उन्होंने fork करके they created their own code editor instead of creating an extension like GitHub Copilot. Now the infrastructure behind it all. इन्होंने क्या क्या सर्विसेज यूज की, व्हाट थर्ड पार्टी क्लाउड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर्स दे बॉट एंड दे डिप्लॉयड देयर मशीन्स ऑन. नाउ द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिहाइंड इट ऑल, ठीक है? या सो पहला तो है AWS, विच इज द बैकबोन ऑफ द बैकएंड, API सर्वर्स, जॉब क्यूज, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, राइट? ये सब यहाँ पे डिप्लॉयड है. Cloudflare, which is a reverse proxy TLS termination DDoS protection. These are provided by Cloudflare itself. Fireworks hosts Cursor own fine-tuned models for low latency completions, right? Fireworks mein, if you go to their website, Firework is a good place for hosting models. Own your specialized intelligence, right? If you see a drop-in replacement for closed model APIs, route to the best open model for every task, and cut your AI coding spend to 50 to 70%. So Fireworks, you can host your own fine-tuned models for low latency completions, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, Vertex, XAI, external model providers for chat, reasoning, and specific tasks. This can be done through Azure. You can use Bedrock, right, or their own. OpenAI पे भी जाके you can create API key, but using third party providers are always good because they bring you some discount as well, and those are like built for using multi agents. Now Turbopuffer वेक्टर डेटाबेस है, जिस जो कर्सर का इन हाउस वेक्टर डेटाबेस है, as I already told you. It stores the code embeddings. Now Pinecone is what? It's a vector store for public docs, library and knowledge. Pinecone is also kind of a vector database, but these vectors store public docs, library, knowledge. Now exa and serp API powers the web command for live web search. ठीक है, तो आप अगर देखोगे in cursor, if you ask, just go through these docs and those kind of things. So that is done via exe and serp API, जिससे they power @web command and they can just go and search anything. Datadog and Sentry, these are most popular monitoring tools. You might be aware of it, right? Monitoring and error tracking code content stripped from logs. Up SERP API, you can also go to actually this, right? SERP API, LLM search API built for AI agents, feed agents, live SERP data proxies, retries handled. Now, if you see SERP API, the real-time web service designed to search engine results, right? As I said. Now, Datadog देख लिया अपन ने monitoring में. Work OS, what is Work OS? Single sign on and authentication, right? तो sign in authentication के लिए भी. Now you see, right? इन्होंने क्या किया कर्सर ने? It did not worked on building another AWS or another cloud service to use their things, right? Whatever tools were there in market, they didn't build any monitoring service of their own. Whatever service were in market, अब AI के time पे ना, if you see, things works in a very different way. Previously, what companies used to do, they used to build in-house things based on their own product because उनको काफी ज़्यादा idea होता था what things need to monitor and what not. But market में अब इतने tools आ गए, using that tools you can build your own tool. Don't try to build everything in house. Whatever things are in market, just pick that and joint it brick by brick and then build your product, because building everything in house is time consuming, expensive and deployment वगैरह में काफ़ी time लग जाता है, right? And scaling, horizontal scaling, deciding architecture, system design for it, microservices, dividing services, and then worrying about scaling. So these are the things that you need to worry about a lot. So use the tools that are already in market and then build your product. And just आपका जो product की जो unique thing है, that is of course orchestration, the logic, the orchestration, how you can make everything work together and make sure the outcome is far better than whatever tools that are already in the market. You have to think like an engineer. Don't think like building everything out of scratch, right? Of course you will get to learn about that a lot, but if you are targeting market in अभी के AI के time में ना, things are changing at a rapid speed. So using whatever tools that are in market, that makes sense, right? Now putting it all together, right? Own the editor. What it every feature in this document, like whatever thing we read, it is stacked on top of each other. So what cursor did, it owns the editor for the VS Code, not extension. Is what makes everything else possible. Deep indexing, background VMs, live diff overlays, understanding by meaning, right? Codebase indexing turns your project into searchable embeddings without permanently storing your actual code server side. Fit the budget. Preompts priority based system decides what makes it into a limited context window and everything can't fit. This is the pattern worth remembering. Beyond cursor, almost every serious AI product is built on one core architectural bet with everything else designed around, making that bet work at scale, right? तो AI product is built on one core architectural bet. ठीक है, तो एक core architecture bet होता है and whatever things are other than that is designed around making that bet work at scale. So yeah, that was about cursor. If you have any doubt or anything, do let me know in comments. I will try to resolve. I will try to do some research over it. But yeah, that was about cursor. Thank you. See you in the next video. Bye.